I got asked a question just this morning. I've been asked this question 100 times. The exaggerative 100 times. I don't know how many times, but I've been asked it a lot, which is just simply, if you were to do your MMA career again, what is it you would do differently? And whenever I get asked that, I always interpret that from a physical standpoint, the X's and O's. What art or what style would have you spent more time on? And it's a tough one for me, because I did MMA with Clayton Hires, and it's not what I would do differently. If I had a genie pops out of the bottle and I could go back in time, I would have had Clayton Hires in my life training me before I ever got into MMA. If I would have had Clayton Hires in college, I would have reached my collegiate goals. And in many ways, those are more special to me. I don't know why. Possibly because that's what I grew up with, the amateur wrestling, or possibly because it's so limited. Right? You go into college, you got 4 cracks at it. Same as high school. You'll be a state champion, you got 4 cracks at it. It's not something you have time to figure out as you go. It's very locked in with your eligibility. So I will look at and acknowledge wrestling, which is the toughest, hardest sport out there, is amongst the least effective sports in mixed martial arts right now. Surprisingly. I mean, the sport that came in and dominated and showed the world that it is, in fact, a martial art, an unarmed, hand-to-hand combative, is now very unused. Guy might get a takedown, but then what's he going to do with it? Can he keep a guy there? Or if he gets taken down, can he get up off the bottom? It's just one of these things where you don't see a lot of that. Now, I still love and believe in the wrestling aspect because of the grind, all the way down to making weight. That's very relevant skill and a very relevant tool that you must have, and then be able to rehydrate and go out and perform in a short period of time. There's a lot of byproducts from wrestling, but the actual moves of wrestling, an actual double leg takedown, an actual body lock to an inside trip. I mean, you could identify on one hand all of the moves and techniques from wrestling that carry over to MMA. And it's extremely limited. It's a posture issue. Right? It's a posture issue of straight up and down as opposed to bent over, but it's very limited, very helpful, very useful. But would I go back and put 90% of my time on that, knowing what we know now? No, I would not. And I'm very interested. We have a guy right now out here in Oregon. He's one of my teammates named Sage Brown. Very good high school wrestler, state finalist, multiple time state placer, but he got into MMA as a 7th grader, and he will come in every day and work on MMA. No matter how many times he has high school practice, what's required of him in wrestling, whatever tournaments, he's still coming in the room. He's a sparring partner at 15 years old with Ricky Simone. He's still a sparring partner of Ricky Simone. Sage is now 18 years old, but he's done with wrestling. He's fully pursuing MMA, and he started this. He kept it in his back pocket. Kept the kickboxing, he kept the Western boxing, he kept the jiu-jitsu, did the wrestling with his high school. So for me, I'm keeping a very close eye on Sage. I want to see how this training comes about. I want to see what's just enough wrestling. Because there's a point in wrestling where it no longer helps you in MMA. It would not matter if you were a couple of times state champion or an Olympic champion in MMA. There's a point where the more advanced levels of wrestling just don't carry over. Same with jiu-jitsu. Would not matter if you were the Abu Dhabi champion or if you just won the trials. There's a point where, okay, that's enough. That's enough. That's all that I need. There's a point within boxing. There's a point within kickboxing. As you look back over time, we've seen the evolution. And I can't think of very many guys from yesteryear that could compete today with the skills that they had from yesteryear. I would be very curious, Frank Shamrock. He was very ahead of the curve. Randy Couture, I'd be very curious just because of that grit, grind, and his ability to compete. A 19-year-old Vitor Belfort who had incredible hands, very strong, black belt in jiu-jitsu. I believe that Vitor Belfort of 19 could compete with the guys today, but there's not very many other guys. Even the greats, no disrespect. I think that he would agree with me, but the great Maurice Smith. I think that Maurice Smith, who's a Coach Smith now, I think he would agree with me. Yeah, the skills I had then and got me a championship would not get me it today. I think Oleg Tiktarov, I think that Tank Abbott, I think that Marco Huas, I think that Don Fry, I think those guys, Mark Coleman, I think that they would admit, no, It's grown and it's changed, and it's now those guys would have grown and changed with it, by the way. Right? Those guys were just great athletes. I'm talking about time machine. You took them from the 90s and stuck them in there in 2021. 19-year-old Vitor beat a lot of guys still today, for sure. But he was one of those guys that was very diverse. So when you look back and how you're going to train, a lot of guys are really believing in Taekwondo. A lot of guys are really believing in karate, even though the techniques of Taekwondo and karate are not out there being used. You're not seeing a lot of karate techniques, but you are seeing a lot of those movements, right? You look at Wonder Boy or you look at Machida, two guys that have really represented the art of karate, but those guys have movements way more than they have attacks. They have ways to make you look. They shift their hips and freeze you into stone, coming with their strikes. Taekwondo teach you how to kick the legs, kick the body, kick the head. So there's a flexibility issue. There's a range issue. But some of those sports aren't developed enough with Saturday tournaments, with more of the full contact to actually test the skills and the ideals from an ideological standpoint. Whatever those moves and movements are, if you don't put people together, if you spend a lot of your time, they call it kata. People tease and say they're punching the air, but they deserve to be teased. Nobody knows how good your skills are if you're just punching the air. In boxing, they don't call it kata, they call it shadow boxing, and then they put somebody in front of you and make sure that it actually works. So it's one of those things where I'm still very open to the ideas. There is some sports that have proven to just not translate, and I don't know why. It would be very hard for me with any kind of a straight face to pay any kind of homage or respect to the sport of judo. Judo is wildly popular and practiced by masses, even though not necessarily in North America. In other parts of the world, it's even part of a curriculum within school. PE class. You guys, PE class. You can go play Frisbee or go play tag. Well, in some parts of the world, they go and do judo. All the way through the Olympic Games, you can get scholarships into colleges. You can represent your national team. You can go into a professional league. For whatever reason, judo has never translated to mixed martial arts, and it's had a number of really good representatives. Judo has never translated to the submission undergrounds or the Polaris or the EBIs or the Abu Dhabis of the world. It's wildly underrepresented, and when it is represented, it's not on the medal stand. Sambo would be another one. Khabib and Fedor will swear up and down of Sambo. That's out of respect. Sambo is the art of the Russian military. It's one step away from the AK-47. The Russians will all argue that the AK-47 is the greatest gun, and the Americans will all argue it's the M16, because that's what our military uses. But that's the same reason that Khabib and Fedor claim Sambo. It's out of respect. It's not because they're actually using Sambo techniques. So we do know over time that there are some sports that don't work. And if I was to go back, I would be a little bit more open, particularly early in my career, be a lot more open to studying pure jiu-jitsu. Not just working jiu-jitsu into my MMA class. I would have grabbed Fabiano Scherner. So what do I need to do? And been in pure classes, learning those techniques, mainly from a defensive standpoint. I would have learned how to stop a lot of them, block them, bring my knee in pass guard. But that's me. That's me. If I was to open it, but I'm very curious, and I'm going to report back to you guys. Sage Brown. Remember that name. I will watch him. I will follow him. I will make sure that you guys have updates. But he has a different approach. And I think his father did what I'm doing now. I think his father sat down one day, studied the scene, and said, here's what we're going to do. His mother, his father, they're all very involved in his career, but it's a very different approach. And I don't think that he needs college wrestling. He's a very good wrestler. I think he knows enough. But I'll report back to you. I promise.